We have an amazing panel this morning, and I was sitting here and I said, how do you start this? I feel like I came here, and I'm just going to say more than a decade ago, my first trip to Cannes. And I came and I moderated a panel for Procter& Gamble, and guess what the topic was? Where are the women? Where are the minorities in the advertising business? And why are we still talking about this? Like, it's still this issue that hangs over this industry. And I just love all of you just to give us your take on why this has been so slow to see progression here. Maybe we'll just start with Antonio and go down the line here, because it is astounding.
My take on it is the resistance to change. Every industry runs in momentum. And when you actually are asking any company, any culture to actually change something so fundamental as what we're talking about, it takes a lot of time, effort, and commitment. Part of the problem is what you just described, that we've been spending 12 years just doing what we're doing here. No panels, let's talk about diversity. Sure. Let's talk about the need to make it a business case and all that. I think we're late. We're very late. We are spending way too much time talking about the issue and not enough time actually acting upon the issue with quantitative objectives, with measurements, and holding people accountable for it with consequences if they don't achieve those targets.
True. Frank, we were talking the other day, and everybody always talked about it's a fair issue. What's the numbers look like? But if you pick up the cover of the Wall Street Journal today, what is on that headline? The crisis at Uber. Like, what lies at the heart of some of these issues, right? Diversity and no diversity in the cultures that then breed these problems. Can you talk a little bit about why this is a higher calling for companies and what they need to do?
Yeah. Even going back to the first question,
Yeah.
I think the reason we're here talking about it still, and it seems
Yeah.
like there's very little progress, even though I think there has been progress, it seems like there's very low progress, is because diversity is hard. It is really hard. People are inherently uncomfortable with people who are not like them. They either don't look like them, they don't act like them, they don't use the same language, they don't have the same stories, they don't have the same symbols, they don't have the same rituals. Suddenly you feel, some people may even recoil from that. And so that's a difficult thing to overcome. You can teach people to become more comfortable with difference, but it's hard. And then I think if you layer on top of that the disruption that's happened across every single industry, and people now say, first of all, I got to survive and perform. And then you look at diversity. If you look at it from the perspective of it's purely about fairness, which I think there is a fairness argument that we should make and we should embrace. But if you look at it purely as fairness, it falters in that environment, because you will always go to survival first before you go to fairness. And so I think the two things they come together in this sense, in that it's a little bit of what Antonio was saying. We have to move from kind of metaphor and pure narrative and fairness to actual science. That's the time we're in right now, where we need to understand the science of diversity, and that diversity actually does work. And there are more and more studies around that demonstrating that diversity works in certain situations, particularly when there's a complex problem. And we can talk more about that, but I think unless we get to the science of diversity, and that it will lead to better results.
Right, and what that'll do for a company's business, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Bottom line contribution it's not going to move. Yeah.
Colleen, you've been in this business for as long as I can remember, as long as I've covered you. You grew up through the ranks of these agencies. Talk about why it's so hard to change, because you've seen it from the inside.
I have, and I think that I'd love to speak about it specifically from a creative perspective, the creative department. I mean, we're all creative people, but a creative department perspective, because I think it gets, the spirit gets very pointed at that space. And that the idea of what we do creatively, if you look at it, is over and over and over. Every day you wake up with a blank sheet, and very quickly the process is have an idea that everybody gets, distill it down to its bare essential thing, make sure everybody likes it, and then you start working on it, and for it to be great, everybody has to have the same idea about it.
Yeah.
So apply diversity to that. Apply what I think is funny, or my point of view on the world, or yours. And what it does is it creates complexity and friction in what has been a long-established creative process that works. And so there was a resistance always. If you weren't on the ship, you were out of the room. So it's like, do you agree with this idea? Is this a great idea? And if I was like, well, it's like, okay, well, he likes the idea. Let's go. And very quickly, you sort of find that you are pretending to think jokes are funny,
Yeah.
or and then you resist that, and you either find your own voice and have the strength to make
Right.
the work, or you don't. And if you're higher up, it's easier.
Well, when we were
Does that make
talking,
sense?
Madonna, how do we we could talk about it, but what are the things that we can do to fix it? You talked about policies at companies and how they should be changed. What do you think is the things that will get everybody to stop talking and here's the steps you need to take?
Well, I mean, I agree with what everyone has said, but certainly when you look at family leave and the importance of that, because typically in the workplace we all start out at about 50-50, men and women. And then as we go in our careers, men tend to take off at about the time that women start having children.
Yeah.
And so that number quickly becomes 70-30. And the United States is one of 3 countries in the world that doesn't have a government-driven Family Leave Act, and the other 2 are Papua New Guinea and Omar. So, I mean, it's pretty astonishing. And so when you want to have children, if you're a mother or father, however you want to start a family, if you don't know where you stand, then it's very difficult to tell the truth about how long you might be away, if there isn't some sort of family leave that everyone really talks about, then there's no expectation about what will happen when you come back,
Yeah.
what kind of person will fulfill your role, how will you be included,